This case takes place in the small country town of Abbeville, Louisiana. Little is known about Joseph Schnecksnyder's early life, except for the fact that he first ran off at around age 10. According to his brother, he was known for being a very out-of-hand kid, always finding himself in trouble with his parents or with his school. When Joseph was in the 9th grade, he decided to drop out of high school and started working early. He hopped around many jobs, starting one and then quitting once he felt tired of it. He was, for a short time, part of the Louisiana National Guard, but he left from a medical discharge. He was always going off somewhere. He told me he'd seen every state in the country, his brother recounts. His behavior always seemed to point out that he would end up running away from his problems the second they arise. Seeming to never be able to find financial security, Joseph even joined a circus for part of his life. He sold cotton candy and peanuts at these shows, and even got stranded in New York while traveling with the circus because they went overseas and he didn't have enough money to go with them, having to use the church's donations to get him on a plane back to Abbeville, Louisiana. Jason Herbert, a man who is now a detective for the Abbeville Police Department, went to school with Joseph, claiming that he was just another kid and that nothing really stood out about him. Fast forward to January of 1984. Joseph is now 26 years old and is summoned for a court hearing, but never shows up. His mother, as well as the rest of his family, just believed that it was one of his many episodes of leaving town to get out of some shenanigans. But this was anything but that. After a rather long period of time, the family still had not heard from Joseph. Shockingly, there were no missing persons reports on Joseph to this day. His family never even took a moment to go and report that their beloved Joseph was missing. He must have left home countless times for this to even happen in the first place. Fast forward to July of 2011, at the Abbeville National Bank, where renovations were being done on the second floor of the bank, a floor previously used as a storage space. When a contractor was installing plywood on this floor, he removed a metal shield covering the face of the fireplace and discovered small bones and clothing at the base. Confused, the contractor looked up the chimney and saw something he would never forget. This contractor immediately notified the bank, who then called the police. Investigators could not identify this body, as it was decomposed past recognition. DNA testing revealed that this was a missing Joseph Schnecksnyder. The only item investigators could find on the body were rubber gloves. The story of what actually happened and why Joseph was trapped and killed in the chimney will never be known, but there are some speculations as to what happened. The leading answer, and the one that we believe that happened to Joseph, is that he attempted to climb the chimney after his many struggles with money. This would explain the rubber gloves found next to his remains. His remains also had no evidence of foul play, further pointing to the fact that Joseph most likely was just trying to rob the bank for money. He wasn't thinking straight, and before he knew it, it was too late. However, the question remains, how did nobody hear Joseph's screams? And why was his body not found until nearly 3 decades later? I'm 33 now, so this was a long time ago. I only remember parts of it, but my mom said it was the most terrified she had ever been in her entire life. As a kid, I had a problem wandering off, and I still do as an adult. And it's usually caused by someone grabbing my attention and I just disappear from a group. It's a joke now, but when I was a kid, it was incredibly dangerous. I would find out 15 years later that this was my undiagnosed ADHD kicking in. My family went to a park one afternoon. It was a beautiful day, and my mom and dad had a picnic on the grass and were drinking some wine. My siblings and I were off in the field playing. At some point, I saw an old man sitting on a bench. He wasn't looking at us or bothering us, but my ADHD brain decided to go say hello for some reason. In addition to wandering off, I also had a knack for talking to strangers. I remembered this old man seemed nice. He showed me a magic trick, the old coin behind the ear thing. I thought it was cool. Then he showed me a couple more tricks. This is where my memory blanks until my mom ended up finding me. At some point, my mom noticed I was missing. She knew I had an issue for wandering off, but the fact I couldn't be seen in an open park was alarming. She searched for about 5 minutes, but couldn't find me. Eventually, she ended up finding me with this old man standing in between 2 cars in a parking lot. I don't remember how I got there or why I even went there, but I do remember my mom swooping me away from the man and freaking the hell out. My dad ended up punching the guy, I think. From what my mom said, no foul play was apparent when she found me. He just looked like a quiet old man in his 60s. But the fact that I was in between 2 cars probably meant I was seconds away from getting abducted if my mom didn't find me there. So yeah, don't let your overly friendly ADHD kids talk to strangers. Fuck. And to that old guy, let's not meet. This only happened a few hours ago, so I'm shaken, but it's too early in the morning to phone and wake up friends, and I needed to talk to somebody before this gets out. I'm so creeped out and concerned, so I thought of coming here. Brief setting and context. I'm a woman in my 30s, caring for my elderly parents, so staying in a downstairs room in my childhood home at the moment. The window faces a main street, which is an average residential street in a fairly quiet area. The bed faces a window. I often leave the window open at night since I need to be cool to sleep. And I haven't really worried about it, since there's a cabinet with an aquarium in the front of the window area, not blocking the window from my view, and I can reach to open and close it, but it would make it difficult for someone to climb in. My dog, Sable, also sleeps in the same room with me. While she's a sweet-natured, medium-sized dog who doesn't look the least bit threatening, she's a fantastic guard dog in that she's always alert to any noises, and will stand her ground and bark and growl if she senses a threat. So I've never really worried about the open window, but after tonight, I won't be able to do it again. It started at maybe 3:30, 4 a.m. sometime. I was awake since I care for my parents. I often have disrupted sleep patterns, and I'm awake at odd hours. I was reading a book and heard Sable growl, low and deep. Then she jumped off my bed and began pacing a bit, looking up at the window, before jumping up at the cabinet by the window, barking. I shouted, "Hey, we're calling the police. The dog will bite," just in case there was someone there, and went to look out of the curtains to the side. I didn't see anything. I pulled the curtains closed again, and made sure to pull the right curtain over, then drew the left side curtain, the one that covers the open part of the window, all the way over, covering the right side curtain too, tucking it down so any wind would not be able to move it. I wasn't really alarmed then. It's a fairly quiet residential street, but there are foxes around that we sometimes hear, and occasionally, someone passing by or the neighbor's gate next door will make Sable growl or bark. But she doesn't usually react the way she did this time. She'll usually growl but stay on the bed, and her reaction was much stronger than normal. I thought that even if it was someone scoping out the open window to potentially burgle, they'd see now that the room was occupied by a person and a dog, and would go find an easier target. But mainly, I guessed it was just a random noise she'd heard outside. I was dead wrong. It was a good half or hour more later, after I'd relaxed and thought I might have dozed off soon, that I heard her growl again, a really serious, deep and low growl. I listened. Again, thinking it might be the foxes or something, but I heard what sounded like deep, horror movie breathing noises, like the heavy breathing sounds a pervert makes down the phone to his stalking victim in a film. I sat up, looked up at the window, and my heart stopped. The curtain had been pulled back and lifted at the bottom, like someone was peeking under it, and I could still hear the heavy breathing. I shouted, "Hey!" again and moved from the bed to the side of the window so I could see past the curtain, and saw the figure of a man move from the window to the right towards the front door and exited the front garden. Too dark to make out any features or clothing, it was just a dark male figure. Shaking, I immediately thought that since I knew he'd moved away and wasn't at our window, I reached and pulled it shut, grabbed my phone, and called the emergency services. One thing that creeps me out, in hindsight, is that it would have taken a few seconds for me to move from the bed to the window, and that was after I'd shouted and he knew he'd been seen. But he must have stayed there even knowing I'd seen him until I moved the curtain and could see out. Then he moved away. The heavy breathing also had to be deliberate. It was so loud, like someone was trying to frighten me. While on the phone with the police, I went around the ground floor of the house turning the lights on, making sure the rest of the house was still secure. And it was. Very careful to lock the doors and all the windows at night and everything that looked undisturbed. 2 patrol officers came shortly before 5 a.m. and took the report. They suggested asking the neighbors if they had any camera footage and to let them know of a potential prowler in the area tomorrow. And they went to drive around my area, saying that they'd be wanting to know what someone was doing wandering around at 5 a.m. Since the dark meant I could only see the shape of a person, no real description, I doubt they could do much. I couldn't even be 100% certain it was a man, but the breathing and the figure I saw instantly made me think male. The outline of his head looked smooth, so either bald or wearing a tight cap, and the height would have been average, 5'8" or 5'10". I'm still shaken, but feeling angry and violated, and wishing we had a camera system now. I'm for sure going to be looking into that. I never thought anything like that would happen. Don't have any enemies, no recent exes, no one I know of harboring any grudges. Since I'm caring for my folks full time now, I'm not out socializing or making any enemies, nor are my elderly or disabled parents. I'm at the wrong side of 35 and living in jeans or joggers and t-shirts, no makeup or fussing with hair most of the time. So not a likely target for a peeping Tom pervert. If it wasn't for the fact that it was my dog who alerted me to something both times, I'd wondered whether I was half asleep and dreamed it, that I'd imagined it, that I've had hallucinations once as the bad results of a bad reaction to an antidepressant. But that was more than a decade ago, and it hasn't happened before or since. And I learned how to test my reality in times I was worried whether something really happened or not from my psychologist. When I asked how I could ever trust my own senses again after that reaction to those meds, they said that to be sure something was real, to see if other people can see or hear the thing too, or if it's a noise/voice outside, can I see someone or something that can explain the noise? If so, it's likely not a hallucination, if both auditorial and visual perceptions match up. The dog sensed someone was there first, and I heard, and then saw someone. I wasn't dreaming or imagining it. I don't use drugs and almost never drink. I'm scientifically minded and don't believe in ghosts either. And while I love a good horror film, I'm rarely freaked out by them anymore. Too old and cynical. I have to think that it was someone who was looking to burgle a house, but the fact that they came back so much later, maybe someone on drugs or having a mental health episode, or, and this is the one that bothers me the most, someone who wanted to scare me. But why? Who? They know where we live. Are they going to come back? New fears keep popping into my mind. Like most nights, I'm up at some point late at night or in very early hours, and will let the dog outside into the back garden for a quick pee. I'm suddenly aware of how easy it would be to to attack and gain entry then. There's a passage along the side of the house to go from the front to the back garden with only a small side gate, meant to keep the dog confined, but not designated to keep others out. It would be extremely easy for someone to access and hide against the back of the house, completely hidden from my view. They were bold enough to come back a second time, even knowing a person and a dog were in the room, perhaps hoping I'd fallen asleep by then. They seemed to be trying to deliberately scare me when they returned the second time, doing that deep breath noise and staying by the window even after I shouted. In those few seconds it would have taken for me shouting out until I reached the window and could move the curtains to see out, they could have moved and been long out of sight, but they'd stayed there until maybe there was a chance I could see them again, only then moving away. The breathing noises and then the coldness ran through me when I actually saw a man moving away from the window that will haunt me. Along with their questions and motives, were they trying to scare me? Why? And what's to stop them from coming back?